Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the telescope.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you could do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now. Wave them around, that's right.
Well, hello. Welcome to the Telescope Podcast, the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. Matthew Seipel Anderson helming the ship, bringing you out into the seven seas to talk about Aquaman. That's right, I made it to the theater recently, and I took in Aquaman. And can I just get something off my chest right at the top of this episode? I didn't like it. I didn't like Aquaman! But you know what? I know you'll forgive me, and I'm going to do my best to give you a well-rounded, full plate full of thoughts about Aquaman, and I'm not going to make it into just a slam fest. Yeah, and that is always a temptation to do when you don't particularly like a film, but I am not going to do it. Well, before I dive into my thoughts, before I dive into my thoughts on Aquaman, let's talk a little science. $200 scorkl offers 10 minutes of underwater breathing. That is the headline of a story from newatlas.com. The scorkl is this cool little product. It looks like a little fire extinguisher, except it's neon like green or yellow. And it just has a thing that you stick in your mouth, and the bottle's attached to it, and it's pressurized with enough air for you to breathe underwater for 10 minutes. It looks super awesome, like someone like me who's from northern Minnesota who's never done diving or any real snorkeling ever in my life. I could probably use this thing, and it looks super fun. It was funded by Kickstarter backers. It's only $200, although if you want to be able to pump it up yourself, you're gonna have to pay another $200 to get the high pressure pump. But still, it looks pretty sweet, and it is the result of amazing scientific engineering. You know, they could have used the scorkl at the Salt Lake City Zoo. The Hogle Zoo apparently had a very sick sea lion, and they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the thing. You know, if you had a scorkl, you could have gone down and, diagnosed it. I don't know. But have no fear. The beloved sea lion is better. It hacked up and puked up a child's sock. That's right. Some parent, I don't know, some kid probably took off their sock and threw it in the enclosure, and then the parent didn't know what to do and was like, I'm out of here. And so the sea lion ate the sock, got sick from the sock, but is all better. And it happened without anyone having a scorkl, so, all is well. All right, let us progress now to our feature content and talk about Aquaman. So here's the deal. This movie grossed over $1 billion. $1 billion. That's crazy. So it was a slam dunk for the DC Universe. And I already told you what I thought, but I think I maybe have aged out of the demographic that would think Aquaman is super awesome. However, as promised, I'm going to try to offer some balanced thoughts and some critiques. I'll give some critiques, I'll be honest. But you know what? If this movie made $1 billion worldwide, a lot of people really liked it. So, don't let my word dissuade you. If you're interested in seeing it, by all means, check it out. So here's I'm just going to go through this pro-con list, and I'll bounce around. I thought Aquaman, played by Jason Momoa, Jason Momoa gave us a really likable character in Aquaman, and I actually really liked all the actors, and I thought their performances were great. So that wasn't my gripe with the movie. I thought that the acting was great, the performances were great, the chemistry was nice. What I didn't like is I did not like a lot of the dialogue. It was too simplistic at times, It was like watching a kids show at times where they're like, what? If we don't get the big golden trident of destiny, the whole world's gonna go down? OMG. You know what I mean? It was just like some of the lines were just painful to listen to. However, I really liked the character of Aquaman. Moving on, I especially liked the opening, scenes. I thought they created a really great emotional connection, and it did draw me into the movie. The problem I have is that it didn't carry through the whole movie. That same emotional connection didn't carry throughout, and by the end, it felt a little hollow. Another pro is visually, this movie is gorgeous. Oh man, it is a sight to behold. I mean, all the underwater scenes, and I mean, just the detail, the hair floating in the water, the reflection, the light. I mean, it really is a piece of art. This film is really beautiful. I also really appreciated some of the cool camera angles they did and some different things with the cinematography. Like they had some shots that were obviously like GoPros put on people, so you're like getting the sense of being flipped around, and that was cool. I really enjoyed that. And like I said, just the detail, the color, the artistry was so top notch. The flip side of that is that the CGI gets a little bloated, and at times the story takes second place. The CGI, the looks steal the show. All right, here's another pro. The Black Mantis. He's one of the characters. He is an awesome villain. And in my opinion, I really wish he had been the main villain, the main heel through this whole movie. I wish this movie could have been made into several movies, and I'm getting ahead of myself here. I'll probably repeat some of this stuff. But early in the film, I'm going to try, okay, there's going to be spoilers, but I'll try not to be too blatant. So if you watch this, or if you listen to this, you can still go watch the movie and be a little surprised. But the Black Mantis has a scene early in the movie where he connects with Aquaman in a very negative way, and it's actually kind of a stain on Aquaman that he comes to regret later. And so you have this emotional tie with the Black Mantis character. You see him lose someone that's important to him, and you really feel it, and so you have some empathy for the villain. And that really makes an interesting story when you have an emotional connection with the villain like that. And, again, the other side of the coin is that they ended up using Black Mantis as not so much a central figure. He was involved throughout the whole movie, but he wasn't the central villain. The central villain is Aquaman's half-brother, Orm. Honestly, he was a lame, hollow villain. He was a lame villain. And I think it's because there wasn't the emotional connection. He just was this guy that, granted, Patrick Wilson played this character. He did a great job. He was the kind of villain you wanted to punch in the face. So with that, I felt that his character was hollow because it lacked the emotional depth, and I didn't really care much about him. I didn't feel like he was menacing. I didn't feel like, I don't know, he was a guy you wanted to punch in the face, so I guess he makes a good villain, but he just didn't do that much for me. So there you go. Other thoughts. And now here I'm going to try to hold it back a little bit. I felt this film was so much like watching Power Rangers. It was like Power Rangers meets a bad superhero, at times meets Godzilla. I don't know. It was just weird. And for me, I think it was because the costumes were so ridiculously bright and big, like these big plastic guns. It looked like a Power Rangers set piece. And I couldn't buy into it. And there were also things that probably, like my wife said, this movie just is made for 13-year-old boys. Yeah, that kind of sums it up. Like the smoke, all the posturing they do, and even the soundtrack. That was another thing where they, went with a more modern rock and roll type soundtrack. But for some reason, for me, it came across as just over the top, super cheesy, like the movie Triple X. It just, I don't know. It's like, and I hate to always compare the DC cinematic universe with the Marvel cinematic universe, but it's inevitable. In the latest Spider-Man movie, they used, the the latest live action Spider-Man movie. They use some rock songs, right? They used like the Ramones, and in Iron Man they would use like AC/DC. And for some reason, when they pulled that out, it was like, yeah, that's cool. But in this movie, when they had, the electric guitar, and they had the smoke coming up and Aquaman, posturing and giving this, hardcore look, it just came across as too much, and I just couldn't buy into it. It was cheesy. All right, then the other gripe I had was just the pacing. This story was very cool. Aquaman on a quest with Mera to find the trident. I don't know what the right name is, so I'm calling it the Golden Trident of Destiny. They're trying to find the Golden Trident of Destiny, and it's kind of this globe-trotting adventure. That's a great story. And the evil character, Orm, forcefully uniting all the kingdoms of Atlantis, or the underwater kingdoms, forcing them to unite in order to assault the Earth. That's a cool story. And also, even Aquaman's origin story of him being this illegitimate child, and that's a cool story. So you have 3 cool stories. Oh, and put that on top of the Black Mantis's story of losing his, okay, I'll give it away, losing his father figure, losing his father, more pretty much at the hands of Aquaman, and having this revenge thing happening. Okay, that's a cool story. So now you've got 4 cool stories and 4 big stories. And what they did is they tried to cram them all into one movie, and at times the pacing was really bad. Sometimes they took it nice and slow, and they were building this world, and at other times I was like, oh, we're going to have this huge epic battle right now? Okay. And so, yeah, so the pacing really lent itself to, I guess I'll just say that the final act of the film is where the pacing was especially bad. And I'll just read what I have here. I was particularly underwhelmed by the last act of the film. They end up inside like a version of Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth, which looked like a cheap set piece, compared to the rest of the film. And then, spoiler alert, fast forward if you don't want to hear this, Atlanta shows up, you think she's dead, in a suit that's supposed to disguise her as, this underwater creature. But the costume looks like it could be a leftover from 1960 Star Trek. And, then Aquaman gets the trident, and they ride into this big battle, and which seemed kind of weird. And then, of course, there's the face-to-face battle with his evil half-brother, who, of course, loses, predictably, but is kept alive to harass our heroes another day. He'll obviously be back in another Aquaman or maybe a Justice League film. So I just felt that the film didn't have a super strong ending, but there were a lot of good things. I love the Aquaman character. Where the film succeeded, I want to end on a positive note. I don't want to totally rip this. Where Aquaman did succeed is everywhere that it took the time to build relationships. Okay, so Atlanta, who's Aquaman's mother, and Aquaman's father. There was a great chemistry there. You really felt that. Okay, Aquaman and his father. There's this great scene where you think these guys are gonna fight Aquaman, and they end up just wanting a selfie with him, and it's hilarious. And he's sitting there having a beer with his dad, and it's just a great relationship building scene. So that worked. Aquaman and Black Mantis, right? They built this relationship. They gave those guys a scene together. And I'll say, by the way, that was the best fight scene. My favorite fight scene in the movie was the very beginning. They're fighting inside this submarine, and they used some cool camera tricks with the GoPros. And it really came across as like a brutal, hard-hitting fight scene, despite some really cheesy shots and some cheesy music. I enjoyed that scene a lot. I also really enjoyed the scene that was in the trailer where Mera is running on top of the buildings, and the officer from Atlantis trying to arrest them is busting through all the walls. That was a super cool scene too. But again, it's because we had this relationship with Mera. We knew her a little bit, and so it was we had that emotional connection driving, the action. And finally, this to a lesser extent, but Aquaman and his teacher, which I don't know how to pronounce his name, they didn't use it a lot. And the way it's looking at my page, it looks like it should read nudist, like nudist, but I know that's not right. Nudist Valco. I can't even read it seriously. Anyway, it was Aquaman's mentor, teacher, all this stuff. There was a little bit of a relationship there, so that was cool. And again, it just failed when it tried to put too many story elements into one package. Well, there you go. I hope that wasn't too negative. And if you just want to see kind of a mindless blockbuster, lots of action, gorgeous CGI movie, check out Aquaman. All right, well, it is time to
Bring forth the telescope.
Yes, this is the show where we look at geek culture through the spyglass of faith. So I just preached a message on the story of the prodigal son. And in the context of that story, or I should say the context of Jesus teaching that story, is he's speaking to this crowd, and half the people are these upstanding, responsible, religious people. The other half are these blatant sinners, tax collectors, seedy people who are drawn to Jesus' ministry of hope and of God's kingdom. And the people who were from the upper class of society were despising the fact that Jesus was associating with these low-life people. And that just reminded me a lot of Aquaman, right? There was that prejudice by the people of Atlantis against the surface dwellers, and they hated Aquaman because he was this mongrel, half-breed character. And so it fits in really well. So Jesus looks at these people who are so hateful and looking down their nose and thinking that they're so righteous, but in reality they're not. And he tells them this story. And the story is a very familiar one. Most of us know the story of the prodigal sons. Basically, this guy had two sons. The younger son asks his father for his inheritance early. And his father, being a generous man, gives the son his inheritance, and the son strikes out on his own. But the son just takes his money and wastes it on prodigal or wasteful living. And so he's away from his father's house. He's living the crazy life, living the drug, sex, rock and roll type life. And eventually it all comes crashing down. He has nothing, and he has to take a job feeding pigs, working on a farm, which, for a group of Jewish people, for a Jewish audience, they would understand that that's like the lowest place you could go because they're not allowed to eat pork. And so the son says, you know what? My father is this generous, loving man, and everyone who works for him has food to spare. I'm at the bottom here. I've hit rock bottom. I'm just going to go home to my father and see if he'll receive me just as a worker. Let me work for him, give me a job, and I'll be happy with that because I'm going to die if I stay out here. So he goes home to his dad, and of course, you know the story. The father sees him far off. His heart just overflows with compassion. He runs down the road to his son, embraces him, hugs him, has a good cry, gives him a kiss probably, and says, hey, bring a robe and put it on him. Bring some sandals for his feet. Put a ring on his finger, because my son who was dead, he's alive. He was lost. Now he's found. Well, the story continues with the older brother. The older brother hears the story of celebrating and dancing, and he calls to one of the workers and says, hey, what's going on in the house? And he says, hey, your brother's back, and your father's so happy. He killed the fatted calf and is throwing a party to celebrate the younger brother's return. Well, the older brother, this is it. This is like the last straw. He blows up. His father comes out. The son blows up at the father, yells at him probably, accuses the father of refusing to even give him a goat to have a get-together with his friends. The son is so angry, he refuses to go inside to celebrate. Uh-oh. Now, who's the prodigal? The prodigal's home, but the older religious son, the older upstanding, respectable son, he despises his brother, and he's upset at his father's generosity and his father's love and his father's grace, and he refuses to go in. So now he's the prodigal. So the father, though, he assures his son that everything he has is his, and that he's going to have a great reward for his faithfulness. And so that's a blessing for faithfulness. But the story is just so great because it illustrates these two groups of people, the prodigals, the tax collectors and the sinners and the low life people, and then the upstanding, socially responsible, respected group of people who are looking down on the lower group of people. And Jesus is saying, hey, you both have value in my eyes. Every one of you can be a son and daughter of God if you come to me and humble yourself. You know, the prodigals, on one hand, have to humble themselves, admit that they have a lifestyle of sin that's not pleasing to God, and ask for forgiveness. And you see the overflow of love and of acceptance and of grace in God's heart for those people. He runs to meet them. He begins immediately to restore them and bless them and love them. And then also on the other hand, to the upstanding, respectable people, that they have to realize that God's heart is so big for everybody, and they should rejoice and be happy when they see people coming to God, and they should humble themselves and get on board with who God is and what his heart is for people, and they should go back into the house and celebrate the return of the prodigal. So, yeah, so that's a great tie into Aquaman. And, man, you can be from humble beginnings. You can be, one point Aquaman says that he's a nobody, but he's called to be a king. And the Bible says that, everyone who believes in Christ is a co-heir with Christ, and God sees you as one of his sons, just like he sees Jesus as his son. It's an awesome thing. It's an awesome thing to see yourself in that light. So I hope that encourages you today. And thanks again for listening. I would love to hear your thoughts, of course. And I don't know that I'll make it out to see, any of the other big winter blockbusters. So I'm curious if you've seen Bumblebee, even Mary Poppins 2, or Mary Poppins Returns. I mean, that's a kid movie, but I'm curious about it. I probably will watch that eventually. And if you have any suggestions, things you'd want me to do a show about, I'd love to hear that too. So go on to the Facebook page, which is My Savior's Anthem Music and Podcasting. I do that so I don't have to maintain more than one show. Maybe I should do a page just for the telescope. I don't know. If you think so, let me know. I'm usually pretty moved to do things that you all want me to do because I want this to be a show that you enjoy. And I enjoy doing it, but I want to know what you think so I can add better value to you, serve you better, and just make it better for all of us. So thanks again for listening. Love you all. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye.
What's up, everybody? Everyone in this place, if you can do a handstand, I want to see your feet up in the air right now.